Hello wonderful people, I'm Sam, welcoming you to this new series in Prehistoric Kingdom, a complete beginner's guide to Prehistoric Kingdom. In this series, I'll be taking you through all the core aspects of the gameplay, as far as I know anyway, starting with creating a brand new park. In each episode, I'll be covering a particular segment of how the game works, a particular aspect of gameplay, and once I'm done, I will also upload the whole series as a complete guide in one video. Let's get into it. Here, as you can see, is the menu for starting a new park. There are two modes in the game, challenge mode and sandbox mode. For the purpose of showing off as many of the mechanics in the game as possible, we'll be playing challenge, but if you prefer to not worry about money and just let your creativity run wild, you can also just play sandbox and just go nuts with whatever you want to build in here. For this challenge park, I'm going to choose the desert map, partly because I think it looks cool, and partly because I don't see too many other creators using it. We're going for normal difficulty, so you can get an average idea of how difficult it is to manage your park. Let's go with the arid theme, that fits the desert vibe. So once you've chosen a map, a theme, a difficulty, and randomly selected some starting animals, you can just go into the game. And here we are in the game. I'm going to do this series in 3 parts, at least unless I realize I've forgotten something and have to make an extra one. This first one here is gonna cover the very basics, sort of how to get around the game and very basically how to create things in it. The second episode will go into more detail on how to take care of your animals, and the third will be sort of a slightly deeper dive into the management aspects, keeping the guests happy, making the park run smoothly, the economy and so on. But yeah, this will firstly be the very basics. Real quick, let's go over how you move around. You can move around with your mouse, holding both mouse buttons down allow you to turn, and holding the right one down allows you to move around. You can also move around with keyboard. If you hold down shift, you'll move faster. As you can see, there's a bunch of different menus here in the UI. I'll go over them real quick and I'll dive into more detail on some of them later in this video or on the next videos. But over here on the left side, you have notifications. You can see we already got one. This is like a welcome to the game. You have park issues. It'll tell you if important stuff is missing from your park, like if there's no food for an animal in a habitat or if you're missing an essential building. Right now you can see it's saying I'm needing a compost heap. The game thinks this is very important. And the compost heap is an important building, but it's not really relevant until we get some animals in, so this might be a slight exaggeration. I'll go into more details on which park issues are more critical than others when we get to that. There's objectives, that's not relevant yet. They are planning on adding a campaign mode, but probably not until the game is full released. The nursery holder, this is where your animals will show up once you've bred them. We'll get to that. The Paleopedia, that's pretty important. The Paleopedia shows you an overview of every single animal and prehistoric plant in the game, and also the fossil formations, which is where you excavate them from. Particularly relating to the animals, it'll tell you all the animals' needs, like what kind of food and drink and bedding they like, what sort of fence they need to keep them contained, what sort of biomes and how much forest and water and so on they need, how many you can put in a habitat before they feel overcrowded, so on and so forth. A lot of neat stuff. Always check out the Paleopedia before adding a new animal. That's my recommendation anyway. And you can filter in the Paleopedia if you only want to see animals that come from a wetland area, for example. And you can also like some animals so they're saved in your favorites. I do this with all animals I put in my parks, so I always can check on them real quick. Down here in help, you can see there are guides and tutorials. They're very helpful. Of course, right now you're getting a guide and tutorial from me, but they're still a good idea to check out if you're ever in doubt about something. Then there's a camera mode. It's very cool. You can take some amazing screenshots in this game. There's a bunch of cool features. I implore you to explore that for yourself. Here you can see weather and time. You can also see that by clicking down here on the right side. Time might be relevant. Here in Sandbox, there is a day and night cycle, and when it turns to night, the only way to get through it is just to wait for morning. In Sandbox, you can just toggle the time of day as you like. The temperature doesn't really do anything at the moment, but that's planned for a later update, I believe. And then you have settings. Here you can see I can save, I can load. I recommend saving often, as this is an early access game, and unfortunately crashes do happen, which is luckily, but there's also a dedicated function for sending in a bug report. You can also do that through the Discord, and there's some great guides on specifically how to do that in in the Discord. I highly recommend you check out. I'll link the Discord down below. And then you can go into settings and of course quit the game. Real quick, there's a bunch of things you can toggle on and off in settings. I won't go through all of them right now, but I hardly recommend you going through and sort of tailor the game to your own preferences. I always toggle off automatic animal cinematic tracking. You'll see why when we put in an animal later. Down here on the bottom, from left to right, you can see your overall park rating counted by stars and your visitor satisfaction. We'll get to that in a bit when I go and explain about park management. You can see how much money you've got and how many staff and how many animals and how many guests you have. Over here on the right side, there are some camera settings. You can hide the interface. You can also do that by pressing insert. You can turn on and off the camera light, and you can also do that by pressing L. And then there's that first person mode I mentioned. If we go in here, now I'm on the ground level with guest. Again, I can hold shift to move faster. And aside from being able to walk around and see things from guest level, first person mode allows you to sit on benches and also view through binoculars and go through staff gates. Pretty neat stuff. You can pause the game, of course, and you can speed it up too if you want time to pass by faster. Then there's these ones in the middle. This is all the building stuff. Here you can see you can place in fences. Pretty much all fences come in a 1, 2.5, and a 4 meter tall fence. And then there's an extra one that's a 6 meter tall fence that you need for your really big sauropod animals. But you have to research that. There's also a null fence, sort of just an invisible habitat marker if you want to build a custom fence and still have the game recognize when something has a habitat. That's also pretty neat. These special exhibits are going to be changed in the next big update that's coming at the end of the year. But I'm not really going to explain about that at the moment because that update is going to change that completely. Now you can see night has fallen. So let's go into camera settings. Toggle on the light. As I said, you can also click L. See, this makes it a lot easier to build at night. And if, like me, you're recording, it also makes it easier for your viewers to see what you're doing at night. But yeah, those are fences. If I just build a very basic shape habitat here. If I now click on it, once the fences are connected all around, I can see the size of the habitat, I can see the fence upkeep, and I can see what sort of animals and what sort of plant and cleanliness and so on and so forth that's in here. That can be pretty neat on occasion. And I can also access every one of my enclosures or exhibits from the park services menu. Now, of course, your keepers need a way to get in, and for that you can place down staff gates. They can come in different styles, so it can be like some more heavy duty ones, or a wooden one that maybe fits a little better with this fence. And as you can see, there's no limit to how many gates you can put in. You can also place gates anywhere else you want outside of your habitats. There's no limit to it, which also means you can use them to sort of cordon off areas that you want to be staff only if you want to do that. You've got path, which is the simplest way for your guests to traverse around your park. It comes with all sorts of textures, as you can see, and you can just sort of, you can overlap it with each other, and some textures will go over others. The path you can change the width of and toggle on various other things up here, as you can see. And you can also, if I decide I don't like the look of this path, I can press replace path, and then it automatically replaces it with this different style. Neither path nor fencing can be elevated in the game as it is. I'll explain more about that when we get to the terrain tools. Here you have modules. That's pretty much all the sort of items you can place down in the game that serve an in-game function. So that's all the stuff for the animals. There are feeders, various enrichments, and bedding and nests for them to breed with. It's guest facilities like toilets and shops, donation boxes, and so on and so forth. Educational screens, viewing binoculars. Then you have park logistics. That's all the stuff your staff needs. So here you have the aforementioned compost heap. Let's quickly place that down so the game stops bugging me about it. I just placed it down there. When you're placing down things, it's important to note up here you can choose to use the grid. You can see right now, since I've placed that down, I'm now into the editing of this group. So when I place down this other building, it comes in group with this, which means they are on the same grid. If I exit group editing and place it down instead, now I'm free moving it. I can, however, also turn on the universal grid. I hardly recommend when you're building, especially if you're building some more complex buildings, to start by making the building aligned to the universal grid, and then if you want it to say be turned at a different angle, do that to the whole building once it's finished, because building on the universal grid will make it a lot easier to edit. Here you have park services. As you can see, there are pretty few park services buildings, but they're all pretty important. You pretty much gotta have all of them in your park, at least eventually. So you can see there are the nurseries, which are what allows you to actually make animals and put them into the game. They come in 3 different sizes. Here at the beginning, I recommend just putting in the small one because it's the cheapest at the animals you start with before researching and excavating are all small animals anyway, pretty much. Then you've got the fossil depot and the research station. Everything in here in Park Power, and also a couple of the other things currently in the game, like the visitor ticket booth, are pretty much just for show. The mechanics that should come with them aren't implemented, or in some cases actually relics of an early idea that devs have that they've since discarded. So they're pretty much just expensive decorations, but they can be put in for like added realism. But in terms of the visitor booth, the guests automatically pay for entry once they enter the park, which they do through the spawner, which comes automatically with this lovely entrance building that we start with. You can also place down more. They're very expensive though, so I don't recommend doing that in the beginning, but if you want more entryways into the park, you can do that. The only important thing is, in order for the guest spawners to work, they all have to be connected to the same path system. So you can't build like two separate, completely unconnected parks using two different guest spawners. There has to be at least one path connecting them. As you can see, there's a bunch of locked stuff here, and there's also a bunch of stuff that has a lot more to it than just simply like a basic toilet or shop stall. And that's because we have prefabs, which you can also see in here in the dedicated prefab tab. There are the official prefabs that come with the game. So like, if I want to keep to this arid theme that we started with, I can make it so that all my souvenir kiosks and my toilet stalls all come in that theme. And as you can see, there's a lot of locked ones. That's because there's a bunch of additional themes you can research. When you've made a cool building, you can save it yourself as your own prefab and then access it from here. And coolest of all, you can check out other people's prefabs from the Steam workshop if you have the game through Steam at least. And I really recommend doing that. There are so many cool things. Some of them absolutely crazy detailed. Really, I can only recommend checking it out. If nothing else, just to get inspired. By the way, if you're unsatisfied with some of what you made, you can click on the red demolition button in here, and then you can just go ahead and remove all excess that you don't like. Then we come to the real heavy hitters. The modular pieces and the landscaping. The modular pieces has all the different things you need to make custom things. Say floors and walls, roofs, windows, doors, beams, lights, statues, signs, all the various plants in the game, rocks of varying sizes and styles, art shapes for making something completely custom, and even some effects like a waterfall effect here or a flame effect. All very cool stuff. I'll get into more of this when we start building our first habitat in a bit. Then you've got landscaping. Landscaping has got all your plants, your terrain shaping and your terrain painting, and this is where the fun begins. You can do some absolutely crazy things. As you can see when I zoom out here, the map we have to build on is absolutely enormous, which makes sense. There are some pretty enormous animals in this game, but you can do some crazy things when you are painting in these various brushes. Because it is kind of like painting in big brush strokes or small brush strokes, depending on your settings. So say I want, for my first habitat here, we're in a desert area and I think I want to stick to that. So I'm going to take the size down and the intensity down, all the way down to 20%. And then I'm going to start brushing in, and then it just naturally, at low intensity, so not too many, it adds in some plants from this brush, mostly cacti. If I want to custom that, I can go in here, still up in the tree section here, but just slightly to the right, and select specifically what sort of plants I want to put down. So now the brush only adds those plants I selected. There's a bunch of different biomes, as you can see. Every single biome is available for every single map. There's no limits to it, so there's nothing stopping me from adding in some tundra grass on this desert map if I wanted to. The only thing to be wary about is the fact that each animal likes specific biomes. So say if I put some tyrannosaurs into this habitat and they don't like boreal plants, they won't be too happy about it. Then there's terrain painting. Again, you have access to all of them, so I can fill up this desert habitat with snow if I want to. And there's a bunch of cool stuff in here. Then I have the sculpting. Here you can make little hills or depressions. If I've made a depression and now I want to turn that into a bigger lowered section, I can change to the level terrain tool and just expand that a bit. If I then feel that's a bit too flat, I can use the roughen tool here, and then I'm looking at the roughened area here and thinking, oh well, that's a bit too rough, so I'll just smooth it out again with the smooth tool. Pretty intuitive and very cool features all around. The erode function, as you can see, they do nothing on flat terrain, but once I get to a hill, I start eroding it down. Lastly, we have water, 3 different ones. River water, looks like this. Rough water, like this, and pond water, which is very sort of, as you can see, sort of muddy. As you can see, for all of these features, there's size and intensity. So, and for water specifically, intensity means the depth of the water. So if I just want to make a small pond, I can put the intensity down here, so it's just half a meter deep, and then make a small sort of little oasis pond here in my desert. But of course that won't stop me from, say, if I want to have the pond be deeper in the middle, I can also do that. What won't work, however, is mixing different types of water. As you can see now, I've completely messed it up. Okay, so I've made this little oasis pond. That's cool. Let's make it look a bit more realistic. So we can put in some mud here. Let's choose a different brush so it covers a bit better. Actually, let's just go full on. So now the whole pond looks a bit more muddy. That's nice. Makes sense. Since there's an oasis here, probably the area around that is probably a little greener, so let's add in some grass. Oh, as you can see there, once it hit the hill, it automatically turned to rock. That's a thing, the automatic slope painting, it's called, and that is something you can turn on and off. Now that I've put in my little oasis pond here, I'm thinking maybe the cacti they don't make as much sense right around the oasis. So I can choose in here and then select remove trees, and then it will only remove the trees, none of the other things you might have put into the habitat, like buildings or rocks and such. I do, however, want a bit of greenery around this oasis, but something a little more lush, so let's add in some palms here. Just turn up the intensity a little more. And there we are. This is already looking like a proper landscape, isn't it? Albeit a small one. The textures blend really well together if you mix them a bit. If I go into grassland here and select the grassland mod, for example, and choose a more sort of dispersed brush and a lower intensity, I can sort of mix in the mud with the sand, and it turns really nice. It's a really cool way to make your habitat feel a bit more textured, a bit more real. You can, however, only blend in up to 4 textures at a time. If I add too many over top of each other, it'll start doing this sort of weird thing where you can see the edges get a bit odd and angled. When shaping the terrain, you can toggle on ignore structures, and this will allow you to sculpt despite there being a structure. So I can say hollow out the area underneath my entrance, for example, if I wanted to do that. Conversely, if you want to sculpt the terrain of your habitat but don't want to ruin the foundation of your stable building you've placed in there, you can toggle that off, and the terrain automatically will stop changing once it gets to a building. The only things that you can never edit terrain over, or never edit terrain shapes over, are fences and paths. If you see here, if I try to make a hill, once it gets to the path, it simply stops, and the same with the fence. It just won't let me do it. It will do it on the other side, but not here. Which you can also use to your advantage. If you want a really steep cliff, for example, you can place a path and then raise the terrain along it, and you will get it as steep as is possible, as the game allows you. This is also where one of the limits of the game come into the picture. Path, as I said, cannot be elevated, the same with fences, and they will very easily stop working with you once you try to put them up a sharp incline. So as you can see here, it says slope too high, it just won't path here. And they'll do that fairly quickly once you get some sort of incline, not just on super vertical slopes like this one. The same with fence, which can be a bit annoying when you want some more interesting terrain elevations in your habitat, and that also includes, in the case of fences, the null barriers. They still can't go over a hill, for example. But luckily, the game comes with a bunch of options to sort of counteract that. Okay, we've played with that a bit, and we'll play with it a bit more in a moment, but for now it's time to look at some management views and some park services. Management view is this little yellow cheese wheel up here. You can also access it through here and here down in the left hand corner. If we go in here, you can see a bunch of different menus coming up. Here you can name your park, see your overall rating and what sort of goals you need to reach in order to raise that rating. you can see your overall park appeal. This one I'll explain when we get an animal. These ones I'll talk about when we get some guests, and these ones I'll talk about when we get some staff. So let's instead focus on park services. That's the 3 green things up here in the corner. This menu you can also access by clicking on here, 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 and even by clicking on the relevant buildings. Say, if I click on my nursery here, I can go up here in the right hand corner and go directly to the animal nursery. But I can also access it from up here. Park Services has, as I said, animal nursery. These are the animals you have access to in the game. As you can see, these are the animals we start with and can put down right away. Next up, you have the excavations. For that, we need to build the fossil depot. So let's just do that. Fossil depot down. Now I have access to excavations, this big lovely map where I can see every sort of animal and every sort of prehistoric plant that I can excavate and thereby unlock in my game. As you can see, there are some different colors. White is neutral. The turquoise here means that there are currently favorable conditions at this dig site, so researching this particular prehistoric desert plant will be cheaper and faster than normal. And conversely, the orange sections are places where there is a negative event happening, which means it'll be slower and more costly to research here. And they change every 2 months. So if we just let the time run here, as you can see, a month has almost passed. Once the ring runs out. Now, which dig sites have good and bad events have changed. Next up, you've got research. For that, you need the research station. Also a great idea to get down quickly, so let's pop that in here. Go. Now we have access to all the research. There are 4 different tabs. As you can see here, you have biology, where you can research all sorts of things related to the animals, bigger feeders, the ability to create males, which you don't start with the option to do. The ability to choose and customize the appearance of your animals, the ability to breed more animals and breed them quicker. That's pretty much what you do in biology. All very cool stuff. Then you've got management. This allows you to upgrade your staff, make these produce stations, which allow you to be self-sufficient and produce your own food instead of having to import it into your park, which in the long run will really help you get the cost of running your park down. But there's a bunch of this stuff that needs to be properly researched, and your park needs to get to a certain size before this actually starts to work as intended. So while they are cool, they aren't necessarily super smart to do as the very first thing when you're opening a new park. And then down here you have these things allow you to manage your economy better in general, reduce the upkeep of your park, and allows you to get bigger donation boxes, better loans, lower taxes, all sorts of stuff like that. In construction and design, you can unlock all the different construction themes, which allows you to play with all the many building pieces the game offers you, and it also lets you unlock bigger guest facilities. Lastly, we have security. This is just the fences. Here you can see there's a bunch of different ones to unlock, and many of them will be relevant and needed once you get some of the bigger animals in that need more than just a simple chain link fence or wooden barricade to hold them back. Researching this as well as doing your excavations is something you do with your science teams. As you can see right now at the beginning of the game we have 1. As our star rating increases we will get more and more until we have all 5, and it's the same science teams for both research and excavations. So if I've sent my only science team out excavating, say, some new animals in the Morrison Formation, I can't use them to unlock better fences at the same time. Then we have economy. This is important. I'll talk more in depth about this in the management video, but suffice to say, here you can see a graph of how your economy is doing. You can see and adjust the pricing of various things in your park, and you can take out loans if you really need some extra cash. Here you can see all your animals and habitats. We'll get more into that once we get some animals. And here you can see all your staff, and you can hire them as needed. When you start a new park, you can see cashiers set to hire to fill, which means every time you put in a shop, the game will automatically hire a new cashier. I prefer toggling this off, so I control specifically how many cashiers are in the park. Also because sometimes you put in a shop and decide to delete it again, but then the cashier stays, gets to be a mess. You got laborers, which will transport pretty much all the goods throughout the park. Goods, except for the goods you produce yourself, all get imported from your loading bay. You can build more of these, but that won't really be relevant until your park gets pretty big. But essentially, it'll import stuff as needed, and for extra cash you can speed up how quickly it imports stuff if you're running out of a particular resource too quickly. Conversely, you can set it to stop importing things that you have in excess. Say I'm completely stocked on meals at the moment, so I could technically block deliveries of any more meals until I've used up all that. But yeah, the laborers, they'll carry stuff from your loading bay and all throughout the park, and to manage the placement of goods throughout the park better, you can put in these storage facilities I showed earlier at various points. So say you have a big habitat with a big carnivore, say a T-Rex, you can put in a storage produce right next to your T-Rex habitat, and then set that storage produce to only accept meat, and then the laborers will make sure that it's all stocked with meat. Then you've got your cashiers. As I said, they man all your shops, so they're pretty important to have. Occasionally your staff needs to go on break, so it's a good idea to have just a few more cashiers than you have staff. In my current main park, I have 16 shops and 18 cashiers, and I have yet to see any of those shops go unmanned. So they don't take a lot of breaks, and they're not very long. And then of course you have keepers who take care of the animals. Some of the buildings in your park, like the basic staff center and your research station, you can only have one of per park, and for most of them, that's not really that important. Obviously, you don't need more than one research station, because having one enables you to access the research menu, and that's pretty much all it does. The staff center, however, this is where your staff spawns from when you hire new ones, and more importantly, it's where the staff always have to go back to take their breaks. So it's a pretty good idea, as your park expands, to move your basic staff center to somewhere central in your park. The same is probably a good idea to do for your loading bay. Alright, I hope you have a pretty good overview of the most basic aspects of the game, so let's get into building our first habitat and putting in our first animals. We've pretty much already made simple but very functional habitat, but let's spruce it up a bit more, because that allows me to show off some of the more interesting stuff that you can do in here in the modular pieces menu. I'm looking at this and I'm thinking there's some nice plants, there's a bit of water, some terrain elevation. What I think it needs is some cliffs, some cool rocks that our animals can stand on. Look majestic. So if I go in here to rocks, I quite like this one. Oh, but it doesn't really mesh with the terrain. Luckily, I can just change it. Snowy? Nah, that's not the right. Mossy? Doesn't work either. Sandy? Yeah, this is the stuff I want. So now I have it. When I'm moving it around in free move, I can also toggle on the grid. For something like rocks, I think it works better if it's off the grid. It looks... building everything gridded and square doesn't look particularly natural for a rock formation. But it is neat sometimes if you want to control stuff. So this is just the regular move. In regular move, you can press Z to turn, or C I suppose, depending on where you are in the world, to turn it one way, and X to turn it the other. If you hold down Shift, you can move it up and down into the ground. And, this is probably the coolest feature in the game, if you hold down Alt, just by dragging, no pressing any buttons, but dragging your mouth up and down, you can scale the rock. So that cliff was a little big, but this is a much nicer side. Then Shift, lower it a bit more into the ground. Yeah, that's looking nice. Turn that around a bit. Add another one, which is already looking nice. This one has a cool texture, I like that. But this one, on the other hand, is a little small. Let's just, make it a bit bigger, and lowering that again. Hey, that's a pretty cool rock formation right there. Let's add a bit more to it. And would you look at that? I think that's a pretty cool look. If you want to get into more detail with this, let's say I want to make a little shelter for the animals I want in here. I can go in here. Let's give them a little shelter. It should have a floor. Let's use the grid, so we're working on the universal grid. As I said, that is almost always a great idea. Right now it's set to flatten the terrain and remove foliage, as you can see, so I know it's built on a nice flat base. That's nice. And then I'm looking at these floor pieces and I'm like, white concrete? No, that's not right. Okay, hold on, but if I go down here, I can just change the color and into pretty much any and all shapes of the rainbow. Let's give them sort of a more sandy looking floor. I think that's nice. Yeah, but that's a bit too bright. It's more like this, that almost blends in with the sand. Hey, that's nice. I kind of like the look of that. Alright. But actually, I don't feel like concrete flooring for this particular area either. So maybe let's change it to tiles. Hey, that looks pretty cool. Oh, wow. And I can make a sort of a pattern here. I like that. Look at that. Okay, so that's the floor for our stable. And that can be done with walls, roofs. Let's make that a concrete roof. No, actually, let's make that a glass roof. In most of the other smaller decorational pieces here, like doors, steel beams, you don't have the option to change the texture on them the same way you have with the walls and the roofs, but you can, in almost every case, change the color to your preference. And in the case of lamps, you can even change the color of the light itself to, say, have a red light. Maybe if you want something that looks like a heat lamp, or just a particular street in Amsterdam. There are some pieces in the game that aren't recolorable necessarily. Like this air conditioner piece, for example. It can only come in that metal color you see here. But nearly all pieces are recolorable, including sort of the text pieces and all the art shapes, which is pretty neat. And also all the rocks. So say I didn't actually like the look of these desert rocks anyway, I can just change it. Let's make it a bit brighter, maybe. Like that, yeah. And then the sand on top, on the other hand, I actually want that to be a little darker, I think. Yeah, look at that. Oh, but I only changed some of them, because these are in different groups. So this is a group, I can move the whole group. Or I can go in and move the pieces in the group individually by double clicking on them. But then also what I can do is, if I want to more easily edit all the rocks in my habitat, I can take this group and then hold down shift, click on this group, and now I have selected both groups at the same time. I can press merge, and now they're all one group. And when I change the color, I change the color of all of them. Conversely, you can choose a single piece and split from the group. And within working in a group, you can also hold down Control to multi-select pieces in a group if you want all of the pieces except for one in a group, say, like I've just done here. So I only want to move those. Alright, but back to our stable. I think it needs some walls. Not those. Maybe... what about these? Yeah, ceramic tiles. I like the look of these. So let's put those in. No, I kind of want some windows in the back. I can do that with this, if I want to. Except they are a bit tall. Maybe I can do this a different way. Let's instead take these lower pieces. Yeah, as you can see, as long as I'm working on the grid like this, everything fits very neatly together. There are some things you can only really get done, some particular looks you can only really get when you go off the grid. But what I recommend you doing is build everything you can build on the grid, and then once that's done, build everything else that needs to be an odd off-grid shape or angle, because once you've started working at weird angles, it sort of messes up the grid of the whole group, and you won't necessarily be able to trust that things fit together like Lego bricks the same way anymore. Let's add in a roof on this thing. I think I'm gonna go for like this. No, not a glass roof. This is better, I think. Right now I don't have that many different options to work with, but once you research them, you get access to a whole lot of different ones. And these roofs can be detailed in a bunch of ways. They come with a bunch of different sort of like trims, for example, here. All of which are designed to fit together snugly as long as you're working on the grid. There are some things that might be a little tricky even when you're working on the grid. So let's take, say I take this wall piece and I decide I'd rather have a glass wall. And now I change it to glass, and you can see here, unlike the other wall piece, this glass piece isn't completely symmetrical in the same way. It clearly has an inside and an outside. Actually, pretty much all the walls do that, but you won't necessarily notice that except for the walls like the glass wall here. So it can be pretty neat to take note of that, so all the walls are facing the right directions, because sometimes the way the places the walls meet in the corners, if they aren't placed the right way, you get they cut into each other in odd ways. I mean, that's a pretty basic shelter, but it's pretty nice. But I feel it's missing some detail, maybe some structural elements to make it look a bit more structurally sound. So let's go in and add some of those. I want to put in some wooden beams, so make sure I'm working in the group. It'll only allow me to do this. That's a bit annoying. Don't worry. I'll set the grid width down to 1. Suddenly I have a lot more options to work with. But still, I can't get it exactly the right place I want it to. That's a bit annoying. Well, what I can do is I can select the piece and go up here into Toggle Advanced Editing, and now I've got complete control over where the piece goes. Let's just put it here. That's what we imagine as a support beam. Get it exactly the right place. And then here comes the neat part. Much like with the rocks, you can scale it, but you can't just scale it like the general size of it, as you can see me do here. You can do it on every axis. So I can just make it shorter until it fits. That looks much nicer. Maybe I'll make it a bit narrower as well. And move it outward a little bit. Yeah, that looks better. There we go. Just like that. And then I can duplicate that. But now I'm back to this problem. So maybe instead I choose duplicate with advanced editing. And now, since I'm duplicating that exact piece, I'm moving at that exact axis, and it'll end up just across from it here. Now it's looking all nice. That's great. And unless I press the X button, I can just keep duplicating more and more of these. That's not what I want right now, though. What I do want, however, I think, is one right in the middle here. Over it so it actually hits the ground. Then stretch it until it hits the roof. Yeah, as I said, this feels a lot more structurally sound, doesn't it? Again, copy around. Over to this side. There we go. Now it's beginning to look like a building. What if I maybe want the beams to go along like the trim of the roof here also? Well, I go into the beam here, I say copy and advanced move again. And then I can change the angle of the piece. Oh, that looks nice. But I'm not entirely sure if I can get it to the right angle. Now this roof doesn't actually say what angle it is, but I have a feeling it's about, if I remember correctly, it's about 20 degrees. So I can turn on angle snap. And I think I'm now, no, that wasn't quite right. Well, that's okay, I can turn angle snap off again. Just eyeball it. That looks pretty nice, even if it isn't perfect. Now I want to get it over here. But now I've turned it at an angle, so if I want to copy it and turn it, you can see... that's not gonna... Oh no, that's all wrong. But, luckily, as I mentioned earlier, I am building on the universal grid, because I knew that would come in handy later. So if I toggle this button in the middle, or do like here, world axis, now suddenly I am getting the cardinal directions of the world map. So now when I do this, it turns around smoothly on that axis instead of whatever weird thing it was doing before. And then if I want to get it exactly across from the other, I can simply, in addition to this, turn angle snap up to 90 degrees, then just turn it twice at 90 degrees, so 180 degree from the original piece, move it back into position. There we go. Perfectly aligned. This can be done with pretty much every piece in the game. Every wall piece, every beam, every light, every flower. And you can even, probably the coolest trick you can do with the duplicate and advanced edit tool is if I take this beam, I say duplicate and advanced edit, and I want a completely different piece, but I wanted it to be aligned at the same axis as this beam. So I say copy and advanced edit the beam, and then before finalizing the copying, because now I'm technically placing a new piece even though it's a copy of this one, so I can just go in and change it to whatever other piece I want. So let's say I think I want a little light fixture on here, and I want it to be exactly in the middle of the roof. That's where that beam is, and luckily I can just use that technique. I can just raise this little lamp up until it's at the ceiling, and there we go. That's looking pretty cozy. Now we don't want our nice structural elements to just be on one side of the building. Luckily, advanced duplicate isn't limited to just one piece at a time, so I can hold down Control and then select all 5 of these beams, duplicate and advanced move. And here they come out nicely on the other side. But since we made them for this side, now they're a bit out of shape. So let's just angle snap 90 and turn those around. That looks a lot better. Now I'm not exactly satisfied with the colors of this building. Luckily it's very easy to change the colors of a building in this game. I can simply select the whole group, the whole building, and then down here I can change the colors, and that applies to every single piece of the same type in the building. So say I want to change the color of all the ceramic walls to a more sandy dirt color. I can do that here. I want the roof to be a nicer, more classic sort of ceramic tile red. I can do that here. I want all the beams in a nice white, perhaps. That's looking pretty good. Maybe I want this light in a different color. Let's give it a more sort of warm, fiery glow. Yeah, that's looking good. That's a pretty nice stable building right there. Now that we are done building the stable, we should probably align it a little better so it isn't clipping through the fence here. And since I'm finished building on it, I'm okay with going off the universal grid. So now I just move it, toggle off the grid, and just, yeah, get it right into shape, aligned along the fence. That's pretty cool. And there you have it. Alright, this looks like a pretty cool habitat, doesn't it? Let's get some animals in here. Up here in the nursery, I think I'm going to go for the Velociraptor. What a classic animal. And what a gorgeous creature too. As you can see, we only have the option to create females at the moment, and their skins are randomized. But we can change some things, like their maturity for example, all the way from tiny adorable babies to cool sleek adults, and their growth speed, which will affect how long they'll end up living, which death is supposed to come in the next update, sometime this winter. Right now every one of your animals live forever, but growth speed does at least already determine how quickly they grow up, obviously. And it also affects their fertility. If you want to max out the fertility on an animal, what you gotta do is choose the lowest growth speed and have them start as babies. Then they will have the maximum fertility possible when they grow up. I think we are gonna go for a couple of babies and an adult to take care of them. As you can see, they have a bunch of cool skins, but I haven't unlocked the research that allows me to choose those skins individually, so it just randoms them. There's the adult. Oh, as you can see, adults are much more expensive to buy than babies, so that was almost all of my money, but it's fine. And by the little blue check mark over here, we can see that our animals are ready. So let's put them into the park. I can select them individually, or I can simply go down here, say select all, and then release them into their new habitat. 2 babies and an adult.
Well fed, we'll be less likely to run from issues down the line.
Look at how adorable they look. If I click on them, you can see Nigel starts talking about the animals.
Here comes the speedy thief, Velociraptor.
And there's even a cinematic cam mode I can go into, so I can really see them. It doesn't always work out perfectly great, but it can make for some really cool views if you just want to enjoy the animals in your park for a second. And you can just press escape out of that. Even without the cinematic cam, as you can see, if I've selected the Velociraptor, the camera follows it around, and as I turn I still follow it. And again, escape to go out of that, or just select something else than the animal. Now, it does say that there's no food for the animals in the habitat, and even though the first guests are arriving, and we can actually go into first person mode, and excuse me, I can use the binoculars to get a better look at the animals. There's probably some issues we need to address here. They need food, they need a lot of things. But that's for the next episode. So I hope you liked this little first part of the tutorial. I hope it was informative. If there's anything you feel I missed or anything else you're curious about, please comment down below. If you enjoy what you've seen, please like. And subscribe if you want to see more of what I'm doing and learn more about the game. Anyway, take care of yourself, wonderful people. Have a good one.